This little grinder is called the Varia V6, and it's not so small after all, as it's the bigger sibling of the Varia VS3, which has already done quite well for us as a beginner's grinder. Now Varia is stepping it up with the Varia V6. And it really does a lot of things right. It brews excellent coffee, and we'll explore all of that in this review. But there's also at least one issue you should definitely keep in mind before making a decision. And if you handle it, well then, it might just turn out to be the perfect fit for you. Welcome back, my name is Benjamin Kaffeemacher and this is Michelle Kaffeemacher. And every week here, we do espresso grinder tests, espresso machine tests, and everything related to the topic of coffee. And if you don't want to miss anything, then join us on our journey to discover the world of coffee. Just like we discovered the Varia VS6, we already had fun with its little sister. Yeah,
Absolutely. Still think it's genuinely great value for the price.
the Mini.
Do I really have to say?
It's got a very distinct sound dynamic, but it brews excellent coffee and is genuinely affordable too. We've got one or two in operation, and they deliver exactly what they're designed to do.
Yeah, so both are in constant use. I just recently got back into it a bit. We also have the Malkönig VS3, by the way, as a teaser. There's another video on that as well. We also did particle analysis. There's another video on that. They're currently at my home undergoing the filter coffee test.
Yeah, those are always the intensive tests at Michel's place, especially when it's construction phase. But today's focus is the Varia V6. Particle distribution, though, is still relevant. We examined it closely. Particle distribution refers to grain sizes, both individually and in groups. How many exist at each grind level and in what size? That's the level we're diving into today with this video, but there's also a quick summary again. I'll link it down there for you. If you're after a quick and concise rundown of the mill's essentials, check the link below or top left in the short video. Michel, the Varia V6, yeah. Really, it's the small one in a big package. Angles, milled, once out of the aluminum block, and so on. And then indeed, much more.
Yes, there's quite a lot built into it. You've got an adjustable RPM, which controls the motor speed, and that then transfers over to the grinding discs. And you can adjust it between 500 and 1600. That's essentially the range we're working with. We'll dive into the data later, but it's where you can already make a significant impact on the extraction process. Without having to change anything on the machine or the grind size, it's solely done through the RPM. Then we have the option to swap out either the grinding discs or the conical burrs, depending on the specific need. Limited to their own products, it's proprietary. That's a bit unfortunate, but they've found some solutions now. Exactly, they have a large assortment. I think the biggest change compared to the 3 Series is that we now have standard abrasive discs in here and no cone anymore.
It's sized at 58 millimeters. If you want to use a cone, which we also use or could make, you could go ahead and choose a 63. That's basically what's possible here with the mill, and as you already mentioned, the RPM is adjustable. That's all made possible thanks to a compact yet incredibly powerful brushless motor design.
300 watts exactly, that's what it delivers. And otherwise, just as we've come to expect from Varia, this precision-milled aluminum block, a single button, and a convenient button control wheel combo for smooth, seamless, and intuitive operation. Press once and it turns on. Press it again and it starts grinding. Press once more and it turns off again.
And of course, we also adjust the speed here. That will then be displayed up there as well. So no big flashy stories or grand displays up front here.
You like that, of course. Great. The display turns off. My God, I press it and it's there. And then I can adjust the RPM and let it run and stop it again and see it turn off again. I don't need any light in the living room when the coffee grinder is sitting on my coffee bar.
Yes, and for context, we're looking at around 850 euros. Depending on how and where you are, the shipping fee will then be added on top of that, as you'd naturally expect it to be in these situations. There's also the customs fee to consider. So, accordingly, you can calculate for yourselves where you stand. It's really in a different price range than the other model, but it's also a different grinder. So, and it is, and we haven't mentioned this yet, an important keyword, it's a single-dose grinder. So you weigh the coffee using a small dosing cup, pour it in at the top, and then, ideally, it comes out at the bottom, perfectly ground and ready for brewing. That's what makes a good single-dose grinder. And then, of course, it also matters whether the grind size is easily adjustable and can be reset, so you can tweak or save recipes. Because the main goal is to be able to brew various coffees with it. Maybe in the morning, coffee with a lot of caffeine, and in the evening, only the one with little caffeine. Check it. We did, Michelle. The alternative? A dosing grinder. It has a bean container on top. Not here. How many grams fit? Exactly.
40 or so. Seriously, it even features an anti-popcorning lid designed to prevent the coffee beans from flying out during operation. Yeah, let's say 35-40 grams. But that's not the point.
Right.
That's not the idea of the grinder either.
No, and it doesn't stop after a certain time either, which dosing grinders do, but it's really designed for that. In and out. And that's kind of the new trend. And if that interests you, we've also made a video on the topic of single dosing, why we like it, and why we find it exciting for many use cases. Exactly. I think what should be added is that we're at over 10 kilos.
So this thing really weighs something, and a width of just barely 13 centimeters. It's just, for what's accomplished here, I think it's really quite stylish. And then, oh, you've got a suitcase with you.
So she fits into this suitcase. I think it's pretty smart if you have a suitcase like that. Of course, it's really sturdy. You can take the mill later. Sure, it's a suitcase and stuff just sitting around, but you'll need some kind of shipping option anyway. We know the first ones who did it, I think, were probably these guys. That's when the whole machine comes along, and if something breaks, you send the machine back with it as well. Really sturdy, super padded, totally stable. That's exactly how it gets delivered to you.
Great, to come to our courses, because then you won't need a crate. You can just take it with you and head straight out easily. The idea and combo are just funny. Then you arrive with a roller. You show up with a rolling suitcase, and that one, you've got 2 suitcases with you.
I always like to touch things and feel them to really sense their texture and quality. This aluminum block isn't cold, it's not warm either. It has, I'd say, an in-between warmth. It's pleasant. It also feels high quality here. It's slightly rough, but in a nice kind of way. It doesn't pick up fingerprints much, which I personally find really great, of course. So really nice. And yeah, that's maybe something to add. The same thing applies, by the way, to this particular cup as well. Looks, surface-wise, just the same. It fits really well with it. It's sometimes a point of criticism that we feel, well, that the wood doesn't match or that there are 2 different types of wood, but no. It fits wonderfully here and also works really well on the 58mm portafilter. You even raved about how it causes relatively little channeling, even though this edge comes into play. I even have a relationship with different cups because, when you have a different grinder at home every 2 weeks.
And this is supposed to, I don't want to complain, it's exciting, it's super exciting to try out. Then you'll realize just how drastically different cups can actually be when it comes to brewing coffee. So next time you're wondering, I'm doing everything right and still getting channeling, try using a different cup. That much I'll reveal for now. I want to try out the rest. And here I really feel like this rim goes pretty deep into the portafilter, with the vertical compress or horizontal at that moment and then vertical. But with the cup, I haven't experienced any channeling, which I'd attribute to the cup.
Now, something very essential is happening, and I also think it's good. Firstly, we have a magnet. Secondly, we still have the rubber base, and that creates this feeling of placing it in here. Very pleasant and not so clattery. Also, the coating here will probably wear off less quickly because there is still that very minimal, perhaps 0.0. With a 0.5 to 1 millimeter rubber base layer, it's attracted by the magnet, slides up quietly, and remains stable throughout. I agree with that. It's really well thought out and executed, making it a solid choice.
Essentially, the mill could also be easily operated from a wheelchair, making it highly accessible. The only thing you can't see is the display. It would need to be at the front.
Right. From the front, it's perfectly fine.
Also from a low altitude, it's just... The adjustment is fairly easy. I could imagine that you might accidentally change the RPM. You have to be a bit careful with that.
Yeah, let's do a little something here.
Attach the mirror on here. Yeah.
To redirect it forward and outward.
It comes with various additional accessories.
Is the elephant in the room? We also need to talk about that. You would have rather avoided it?
No, I have to bring it up. You want to know, after all. There's still this blower attachment. You just put it on like this. It also has magnets. By the way, speaking of materiality, what I find odd is the color differences. This lid has a different color than that. And I would also argue that this is a light anthracite, while the other one is black.
Yes, that one is a bit darker. It's a different material.
You saw it well, felt it well. And then there's this blower attachment here. And then there's the lid placed right on top once again.
It fits on the bottom as well, right?
Exactly, it fits on the bottom. That's really well executed. I'm genuinely impressed by how seamlessly everything fits together.
Again, elegant, high quality. It makes a good impression right now in the basic structure, and yet we haven't even used it. We might be able to postpone that for a bit. That's actually our biggest point of contention at the mill. But let's just keep it here for a moment. Grind settings are good and also super easy to adjust. We'll talk about that in more detail when we get to filter coffee. For specific reasons, we've taken off the hopper and now operate without it. Despite other drawbacks that arise, I think we simply need to talk about it now.
We must discuss it.
Just a moment. There's an adjustment possibility, or something simply happens on its own. Put that thing back on there. It's really getting on my nerves. Well, first of all, perhaps it's dead space. Nothing at all. So, no, really.
Dead space. With a blower, we can say dead space with a blower. There are different levels of dead space. There's the dead space we exchange, the exchangeable dead space, and that's super crucial for us when it comes to the performance of single dosing, especially in precision and consistency. That means period. If it's minimal, then we'll always have very, very little pre-ground coffee in the subsequent extraction. And that's really good with 0.3 grams, or slightly more than 0.3, something like 0.35 or around there. That's actually quite good, though it could be a bit less, and this result was achieved without using the blower at any point. If I use the blower, I can reduce it to almost nothing, and it has two distinct layers. It has this first layer, and then it has this second layer as well. I'll get to that in just a moment, but with this, you can entirely clear out the grinding chamber and make sure the outlet is completely empty. Out and fine. The issue with this blower is that it's a positive feature which results in a negative outcome, because the grind size adjustment is incredibly smooth and easy to handle, almost effortless in its overall operation. And when I use this blower, it's not the pumping itself that would adjust the grinding chamber, but you don't do it like that, of course. As you could, but when I do it like this, I adjust it with it, because I make a slight movement with my hand and really keep it minimal. I end up adjusting the grind size with just this tiny, subtle motion. Not from 1 to 2, but in small, gradual steps. And each and every single time.
With every press. And you've just seen it now. When you do that, you can see it right now. So it's exaggerated now, but it quickly tends to shift, and in your case, it tends to keep spinning in a clockwise direction. And we verified it again with additional models. We also reached out to people who own the mill, and they were able to confirm this observation as well, adding further validation. This means that we ultimately made the deliberate and carefully calculated decision to operate without the blower, choosing instead to accept and adapt to the 0.35 grams of interchangeable dead space within the system design. With that, it's no longer in the very good range, just the good range. So criticism at a high level, but it's simply there. And the interplay between the hopper, the blowing, and setting the grind level doesn't work well there either.
That's why I would genuinely leave that out. And just stick to using the lid, simply toss it in, and then pull it back out again afterward. An important tip about that we've also received from several different sources. And that if you already have or buy the mill, you can make it a bit sturdier by adjusting the settings or adding support. I really noticed that it makes a difference. I'm just explaining why I came to that realization. When you open this thread, it's a fine thread. You'll have to open it regularly anyway for cleaning purposes. but right at the very start, open it up and carefully remove some of the grease from the fine thread, because it doesn't need to run even more smoothly. So, nothing serious happens, but you can improve it this way.
Yeah, but Michel, you've taken it off now, and I still think it feels way too sluggish and slow.
Yes, but what I improved is that before, when I placed the lid on the magnets, it was like this. And whenever I rotated it, the magnets would cause it to spin uncontrollably. Now, I can easily twist it off without any issues.
I still have that right now.
Exactly. So I just say the lid, you can use it or leave it off entirely. Then you can do it perfectly like this.
Then you have that small, exchangeable dead space, but also, and this is key, you have a larger permanent dead space. So I would definitely say for single dose grinders, it's quite a significant exchange, more of a permanent and substantial one.
And that's precisely why it's essential to clean them on a regular basis, just like with all grinders. That's why I always stress, even if grinders are designed for easy access to the chamber, make sure to clean them once a month or every 6 weeks. Permanent and temporary death space. This leans more toward the temporary side, but you can still observe it once more over time, clearly. So we really have to mention one thing in the videos. Clean your grinders. Here, another 4 to 5 kilos of coffee have already gone through. That is temporary and that is permanent, because permanent dead space can also develop and build up over time in this case. And after 4 kilos of test range, we eventually discovered about 2.5 grams of permanent dead space in there somewhere.
You've become completely tolerant. Within just months, cleaning up. Hello?
Yes, no, with unscrewing. So, normal household usage is enough. For example, if you have a regular dosing grinder, I would put powder in every 3 weeks and let it run through. I'd suggest opening it up every month and a half to 2 months. If you're doing 4 to 6 extractions daily, or let's say 4, that's roughly about 8 coffees at home. Then once a month is enough. Open it up and scrub it down. Unless you have a very dark roast coffee, then I would do it more often.
Great. Michel, thanks. That was the topic of dead space. We've covered it here. The different levels of dead space, but there's still that one down there. Exactly. There's still something stored down there as well, you see now.
And that's pretty cool too. I'm such a cleaning freak. Take it away, give it a good scrub, and please do it regularly. It just makes sense. And then it's got this spring-loaded mechanism.
It's not really cool now.
Number, I like removing it. That's cool, but the spring mechanism, great idea, but the execution is lacking.
So, for anyone who's always wanted to own a cow, now there's a mill that you can also milk. I think the idea is good.
But it feels
so stiff.
It feels far too low quality. It doesn't match the rest of the mill's style.
Yes, it's just not intuitive at all. Pulling on it like this feels awkward, imprecise, and really clunky. What is this even? The only thing it reminds me of is the whole process of milking.
I've never done that, so you can tell me more about it. And then we also have anti-static needles, if you can call them that, built into here, which are supposed to break or reduce the static of the mill. I can't tell you how it was before. I can't tell you how it is with the Varia FS3. You need that water spray, this RDT, to make sure you don't end up with any static buildup. Here I'd say it's possible to skip it, but it definitely makes a difference. With single dose, especially when not using a blower, it's always a good idea to spray water on it first.
We're in the middle of the video, covered a lot, but a few things are still left open. In terms of volume, I think it's a positive improvement, especially when it comes to the acoustics and also the sound quality compared to the smaller model.
Yes. One stayed.
However, we are currently at a medium volume level of around 75.7 decibels. But it sounds genuinely pleasant now. It's truly no longer unpleasant at all. No screeching or anything like that. Speed is still an important point.
Exactly. It still takes you quite a while until it's fully ground down. I mean, completely and thoroughly ground. We always measure it the same way, taking 10 seconds of grinding with the hopper fully loaded and ready, so that we can observe how fast a grinder operates. By itself, it manages to grind just over 11 grams in 10 seconds. However, to actually achieve those 18 grams, you'll need roughly 20 seconds for the grinding process to be fully completed at 1000 RPM, which represents the average speed.
Exactly, that clearly places it among the slower grinders. No question about it. Definitely on the slower side. Yes. And it just moves relatively slowly afterward. That's a bit of the issue. But in the end, everything gets ground. And then we also have good consistency, meaning we essentially get back what we put in. What was the difference there in that case?
1.8 standard deviation, 0.18. Thanks. An extra zero, or it's too much. And that's completely fine. So if you imagine somewhere it's 18.2, and then it slightly drops down to 17.9, it's all within the expected range. So it creates a slight bit of a small back and forth.
I think so. That's not the mill's strength. Others do it better, being more consistent in clearing everything out. But that's also directly connected to this exchangeable dead space right here, you see. That's naturally also connected to the permanent dead space. It's just a mill that doesn't have its strength there now.
And it's primarily related to the fact that we're not using the blower. Because for us, I've got it. Make sure to write if you have the mill definitely in the comments. If you manage to use the blower, send me a video without it spinning, or if maybe you have a tip or something. Because I think it's such a tiny, tiny detail, but it ultimately has a huge impact on the outcome. And I think that's a real shame, because otherwise we'd have absolutely no retention.
Yes, and there's some solid feedback here. Let's just go with this for now. Maybe we'll find a way to fix it in the future, perhaps at a specific grind setting or something like that. We'll keep an eye on what's happening, and if there's any movement from the manufacturer, we'll definitely keep you updated. But that's where things stand for now.
I'd say, before we dive into espresso potential, quality, brewing, and reproducibility, let's pause and take a moment to savor a freshly brewed espresso together.
I was going to ask, where's this going? Yes, absolutely. I shortened it a bit. That's good. It's especially very sweet. Nice texture. So if I were to say what are the two main criteria for this coffee, or rather not for this coffee, for this extraction, I would say a lot of sweetness and a very smooth texture. Really enjoyable.
Even though the extraction was a bit longer at 28, 29, it practically doesn't take on any bitterness.
I find in the aftertaste it falls off a bit, it doesn't linger super persistently now. But a good espresso.
I find it very clear, well-structured, nicely balanced, and quite enjoyable.
It also has a narrow main peak. We are below 200. We've already noticed, with the current measurements overall, we're a bit narrower at the main peak and have a higher fine fraction. We can't directly compare it with the values we obtained from the same coffee in the last grinder series, but we'll need to extrapolate that a bit further and adjust accordingly. But nevertheless, it doesn't change the fact that it's strikingly narrow and that we can unmistakably pick up on that flavor in the cup as well.
Absolutely. And we'll be able to observe that once more later on in the filter bridge together. But it's just so. The grinder consistently creates an absolutely delicious espresso.
I'm honestly amazed with these smaller burrs that are installed in there now. Absolutely fantastic.
Temperature increase.
Not significantly either. We're increasing by 2.5 degrees overall and generally hovering around 30, so just below 30. That's not noteworthy. This means we don't have a significant warming effect, which we sometimes encounter with sealed coffees in specific situations. Isn't the case here now, and therefore not sensory either. So that's also good what the mill is achieving. So with the feeling, with the mood, we'll now have another filter coffee.
Would this be a grinder for filter coffee at home?
I'm still on the search. We adjusted the grinder to 500 RPM, increased the grind size by 1.5 rotations, and now we're in the filter coffee range. So let's take a moment to see how the coffee actually tastes. To see what the V6 can achieve with filter coffee, we went ahead and brewed up our Amigo. Amigo means friend in Spanish, and that's exactly what this coffee embodies. It's the go-to among filter coffees. Super approachable. It tastes quite broad. Always good, straightforward, and yet it clearly shows how a grinder performs in the end. And now we have a round, sweet coffee, right? Fits perfectly?
Crystal clear indeed.
I find the filter coffee performance quite intriguing. We have a clear coffee. We reached the coarser grind quite effortlessly. Moreover, the grinding process was notably quick and efficient. We lowered the APM because we wanted fewer fines. South. And I'd say the grind range, when you're in the espresso zone, is about 1 turn to 1.5 turns. We're already on the coarser side of the range. You really shouldn't need to go any coarser than this unless you're aiming to try out some fancy experiments. But we wanted to aim for a faster flow time here to push a bit more acidity into the coffee, and I'd say it turned out really well overall. The coffee is fully present. And that's already for me, it's not so easy with this single dosing stuff and making filter coffee. And I would say she does it very well.
Yes, she does it really well. I also find it quite nice to take a little spin around this place right here now, honestly. It's just so pleasant. The small dots up here, the really tiny ones that show the rounds, are a bit too small for my taste, but at least they're there. And now I also don't have the feeling... Yeah, I can already feel some resistance there.
We'd suggest joining the back and forth test. Start the mill, paint, then turn back. But that is truly asking a lot from the mill, especially when working with such small grinding stones. And yet it's going quite smoothly. Simply put, if you set your mills finer, that's always a good direction. Or a good approach, just turn them on so they don't get jammed, so they don't lock up. Because there's always a bit of coffee still stuck somewhere between the grinding discs, and that can sometimes result in us actually ending up with a blockage.
Especially when switching between coffee, cream, or even filter coffee to espresso, I'd always let it run. With good grinders, I mean in this price range anyway, when you make espresso changes. 1 notch finer, then you don't have to let them run. Nothing happens there.
Michelle, and maybe we can also talk about grind size reproducibility here at this point. Because that's one thing. A great filter coffee isn't guaranteed with all grinders, especially espresso ones, since they're not always ideal for tasty filter coffee. The much more challenging situation, however, is often returning back to the precise point in espresso grind size. Here we can say that's a key strength of the Varia VS6.
That's almost... No, that's definitely at the top. I don't know exactly, maybe top 3 or something like that. So really, if you jot down a grind size, say 2.5, 3 or whatever, and you proceed, as we consistently do in our test process, to ristretto, which is super fine, then we transition over to lungo, a coffee cream-like consistency, then returning to the set point without. Additional testing and taking the sample directly as is. So we want to know, if I set the same point again visually, I get the same one I set before. And then, of course, we also do an extraction and measure this sample. And this sample was in the X50 value, so in the average of all particles. In the fines and in the 60% main peak, almost identical.
Yes, that's really great, and it certainly also has to do with the fact that we not only have this here, but also these additional factors. We have a lot of intermediate points to carefully consider and account for, but also that a slight adjustment in grind size doesn't lead to a drastic shift in extraction. And that is often a critique of ours, especially with stepped grinders. When we adjust a step and then have a 3, 4, 5 second difference as a result, you simply can't dial in the grinder precisely. What's here? What's a step do?
Let it be 1.5 seconds. 2. So you have... A step is also, well, you could go in between. So if you really want to bring out those nuances, but you have Let it be 2 seconds, a full step, but I could also choose to go somewhere in between. So it's really so comfortable to adjust that I almost feel like, wow, now I've fine-tuned it, but I still need to make it even more precise because that was way too little of a change to notice, even though it already felt like a lot. And I think that's fantastic. Absolutely. It's so satisfying to fine-tune it precisely and get it just right.
Dear Michelle, with this, we're quickly approaching the conclusion. Before we really dive into it, we've already talked a lot about cleaning, how it should be done regularly, that maybe a month and a half is enough with a complete month and a half interval perhaps being sufficient for a full disassembly, but even that would work just fine. Overall, cleaning is really straightforward to manage.
Yes, absolutely. Super simple. Just take the ring off, unscrew the top, brush out the paint chamber well, take that out, and then give it a little brush inside at the bottom. Be careful not to break anything. So really, simple and quite straightforward to do.
Would you invest 850, 900 euros into the mill?
Yes, I think I would even consider it as a combined mill at home, ideal for both filter and espresso brewing methods, honestly speaking. At the moment, I always try to separate it or keep it separate. Usually it's the hand grinder and the espresso grinder. But I see potential for a combination there, and above all, I see an incredibly high level of reproducibility. And that really blew me away because it's honestly so cool. Then I like this. I noticed it again when adjusting. The first extraction I did was still a bit too rough. And then I felt like I changed a lot without actually creating much in return. And I just think it's so incredibly accessible and really user-friendly. That makes it very pleasant to adjust. I would truly appreciate a solution where I can effectively utilize the blower. Or I'll invent something, or I'll test another technique at home to see how I can do it. And that's what I really wish for. Because then, there's really not much left against the mill. Additionally, in the realm of espresso potential with the adjustable grinding discs, with the adjustable cones, so that doesn't exist. It's non-existent. Then we have an RPM adjustment that we can do. And this breadth of variations, it's truly unique. It's something that doesn't exist anywhere today yet. No cones or discs.
Cones and grinding discs? Yeah, you're right. Okay, the other things then? Sure. Why I'd need those now, all right? It's a playing field. RPM is a playing field. By the way, we haven't even mentioned that yet.
Yes, we can do.
We took a look. Maybe we should say something about that. It's really interesting. Of course, we tried it, tasted it again and again. We deliberately decided to go with a slightly slower rotation for the filter coffee due to that reason. And we can say the same for the espresso. Something happens very subtly with the fine particles, but especially with the main peak. It becomes narrower and wider, meaning when we go down, what happens then?
Then the main peak narrows down, so the cups often become much more distinct and clear. And when you go a bit faster, so we've tested the medium is always 1000 for us, and the maximum is 1600. And then the main peak gets a bit wider again. Maybe a bit more body comes through. You could sort of categorize it that way. And that's just a nice playground.
We've been around 1000 a lot now. That might be a hint for you if you notice it. You might notice it at 1300. It's a bit fuzzy, so try to come down a bit again. Maybe you're even having channeling issues because the particles are somehow of different sizes. Yes, then just go down a bit. This also falls into the area of espresso potential of the grinder, which is why we rate this very highly with excellent or outstanding. We've seen that in many categories except perhaps in speed, which was the only area where it didn't quite shine. But that's one of those topics that, of course, entirely depends on you and what you plan to use the mill for. With single dosing grinders, that's usually less of an issue because it's inherently a different, a bit slower, sometimes a more meticulous process. Then maybe 5 or 10 seconds play a slightly less significant role. In the end, you'll have to decide what matters most to you. If you want to go ahead with that, then maybe take a look at the blog post and also consider what we've written down there in more detail. It delves a bit deeper and neatly sums up quite a few things. And whenever you can, make sure to look left and right, actively seek out more opinions on mills. Of course, take them into account when you're looking to make a purchase decision. That was our take. Additionally, a warm welcome to explore our courses as well. We always have various mills there. You can try out several. And it's always a great experience to personally try out a device before making your final purchase decision. Michel, that's it from us. We'd appreciate a like. We'd love to hear your comments on this video. Feedback on the video. Share your machine experiences. Otherwise, goodbye. See you soon. Enjoy great espresso.